stretch yourself early and often, um, as early and often as you can. I mean, when I graduated undergraduate a semester early, and I could have stayed for the last one, but I already was thinking that, and that time is like, okay, well, I have one more semester of time to fail, make failures, to learn from things. I've stepped out and I left a cushy job as an EVP, at a 3,000 person company in 2022, and took on those interim CMO roles at the startups. And what I'll say about that is, I learned a lot from it, and I'm better because of it. So always just trying to stretch yourself, always just trying to keep learning, always learning. I'm always listening to audio. Podcasts like this. This is, listening to Devin's show here.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Brandon Cobb. And Brandon started out of his journey going to college and wanting to pursue filmmaking. Did a variety of internships in the film industry, and then also took a lot of marketing jobs. And then moved out to LA to be a bigger part of the film industry. Had to figure out how to get both money and talent on board to starting films, which was a bit of a chicken and the egg process. Started doing customer emails to help raise money. Started a marketing business, and then also started some Amazon stores and a couple other side hustles. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Brandon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Devin. Appreciate the intro.
Absolutely excited to have you on. So I just gave a much more condensed version to a much longer journey, but maybe rewinding and unpacking that just a bit. Tell us a little bit about how your journey got started in college or wanting to pursue filmmaking.
Yeah, well, and the whole idea of entrepreneurship started for me from my family. I grew up in my mother was an entrepreneur. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. He had funeral homes. My mother had driving schools and a couple other businesses. So I was raised around people that wanted to be entrepreneurial. And yes, I did start off my career focused on content, and specifically video content. I did those internships both on the East Coast and West Coast. And from there, I realized this is going to be really hard. Actually, one of my favorite, there's a Jay-Z verse somewhere where, like, when he was trying to get started, it was so tough. No businesses would sign him, that he had to create his own business to be able to just enter the industry. And so, for me, I think the mixture of what I was at that point pursuing, but also in the marketing realm, it's like we're all mini businesses in a way. And so how you can present yourself is very useful. And so I started a consulting company, and basically what this allows me to do.
One question just before you get to the consulting company, because that jumps over things a bit. So rewinding a little bit. So you went to college, you got the degree. I assume it was in filmmaking. Is that right?
So undergraduate was 2 majors. It was a communications with a public relations focus, and then a film and video major. Yes.
Perfect. Makes sense. And so now you're coming out of college with those couple degrees, which kind of sets you up for the industry you're wanting to go into. Now, I think if I remember when we chatted a bit before, you also moved out to LA because that was kind of the place that it happens, or to be at the kind of at the center of things. Is that right? Is that kind of where the journey started after school?
Yeah. So, I had been in LA, kind of off and on between undergraduate, and there is another step there. I went back and I did an MBA, and I got that in marketing. So I was in LA. I also went back.
Sorry, one more question, just because you brought it up. What made you decide to go back and get the MBA? Just because you experienced needing to have that business side, or kind of wanted to, or what kind of motivated that?
Well, it's very interesting because I'm back in that a similar situation now. So back then, I realized that the competition that I'm working with out on the or the talent level, not even competition, talent level that I'm working with out here on the West Coast was so strong that I needed additional skills, additional knowledge in order to just be able to even compete and be proficient. And so yes, I went back to Ohio. At the time, I was holding a marketing job in Ohio, 500 store company, and I was traveling around the U.S. Doing their field marketing. But I decided I'm going to go do the MBA and give going back out to LA one more try. And I think that MBA is what pushed me over the top, because I gained such a well-rounded business knowledge there. I obtained a 4.0 in the MBA, which it's not, few people do that at the school. And but I mean, what I took the MBA as is like, I'm going to secure knowledge. It's not just for the degree. It doesn't matter what the degree is. I'm going to secure that knowledge. And so I read every page of every book. And I mean, that's why I got the 4.0s, because I was like highly just focused on absorbing as much as I could. And then from that, moving back to LA, I was much better positioned. I did end up working in LA for actually a company that I was introduced to from a previous time I was in LA between the undergraduate and graduate school, but and later worked for another company in the film industry out there doing their marketing. So I started to mix the two, the marketing and the film that I wanted to do. Yeah.
And so maybe just to unpack that a bit. So rewinding just a little bit. So you come out with the MBA, you're saying, okay, getting the business perspective, getting a better idea as to how that, the business side works of things. Cause I think there is a different, every business you're going to have to, I think if you're going to be successful, and especially if you want to be valuable, the better you can have, not just on the skills of creative. And that is by all means an important part of the, especially the film industry, but also have that business sense of, hey, this is how it works. This is how you actually get a project funded and up and going. And a lot of those things, and even just having that general understanding and background can be certainly beneficial. So now that you come out with that, walk us through, you're coming out of MBA school, and you kind of mentioned you went back to a previous company, but kind of maybe unpack that a bit more as to what was that aspect of, how did you get things going after coming out of the MBA school?
Yeah, so very interesting, because so I put, and this goes back into the entrepreneurship. Ever since I was an undergraduate, kind of have wrapped consulting gigs under a consulting a S corporation that I have. So any like one-off 1099 type things, I'm kind of just throwing there into the S corporation as a consulting gig. Now, so at one point in time between undergraduate and between graduate school, I was consulting a yacht shop. Didn't have anything to do with film. It was just trying to immerse myself in LA, get my roots planted and stuff. I worked at a yacht shop in Marina Del Rey. And while working at the yacht shop in Marina Del Rey, one of the workers who worked on one of the boats, his name was Margarito Rodriguez. I called him Mark. Mark, he had a wife who was cleaning the home of a documentary filmmaker. And when I went back to LA after the MBA, Mark told me, I want to thank you for, we were still friends to today. I want to thank you for, some of the stuff that I was working with him, teaching him. And as a result, he introduced me to that documentary filmmaker who had that house, basically, and got me in there, and they got me an interview. So it's a weird way how connections and networking work, because I was working at a yacht shop, had no connection, and the people that introduced me also had no connection necessarily to the film industry themselves. They're working other jobs, introduced me to somebody that was in that media realm. And that was Not Impossible Labs, Mick Ebeling at Not Impossible Labs. So then I joined Not Impossible Labs. This was, a place where they're turning the impossible and making it possible by creating medical devices that are going to serve a previously unaccomplished a need that has never been serviced before. But they partner with big brands, and then those brands provide their financing and their resources and everything to show that they're doing good things in the world. So ultimately, though, I knew that that was not I mean, as much as I loved like the good cause of that, and I love the fact that it's media related. I mean, we're engaging with at the time Katie Couric from Yahoo News came out, did a story. You know, we're engaging with, we're getting a lot of press coverage, but I wanted to go do the feature films. So joined up with a company that ended up raising, and I led their marketing, raised $4 million in financing and produced 7 films. Now, that was through a lot of mass email campaigns to executives across the industry, a lot of business development meetings. That's that chicken and the egg that you were talking about, where one, you know, you can't, if at the very beginning of movies, you can't get them funded if you don't have talent on board. Most investors want to have talent that they're going to invest in. And you can't really get talent attached to projects if you don't have investors on board, because talent don't want to just put their name attached to things that don't have money to guarantee to pay them. So and each movie project in its own, while the rights of the project are owned by various production companies and various investors, they're all their own LLCs. So they're all, each movie is basically its own startup, and they're all on their own P&L. And so then once you get the funding, well, now you go out, you produce the project, then you distribute the project. There's a lot of marketing involved with that distribution. You know, we partnered with Sony Pictures on the release of a couple things. We had our projects distributed across all the streaming channels that you could imagine, including like paid streaming channels too, like Stars and you know, Netflix and things like that. But also, we sold DVDs in Walmarts, and Walmart would place reorders because they would sell out. So this was great experience there, and that's what led me, eventually gave me the experience, the ability to come down to San Diego, live a better quality of life that I'm doing now, not working you know, as many hours, getting paid a lot more, and just living a better quality of life. And that's where you can see that I continued the consulting business on and off. It always gives you something to fall back to, always something to keep learning from. So if you're working full-time for a company, that's great, and you're, you know, doing that, maybe you still learn a couple things on the side. And if you're not working full-time for a company, you can quickly pick back up from all that experience and get a couple of consulting gigs in there.
Makes perfect sense. So now you're doing that, and so you know, catch us up a bit to almost where you're at today. So you started out there, you know, you are kind of, you know, started out in the film industry, or shifted over to the, you know, almost more the marketing side or the funds generation side, worked for a few other people, had some success, and then kind of a, you know, and you hit on it maybe briefly, but, you know, walk us over as to where you're at today as far as kind of, you know, helping customers. I think you know, right now you've started helping customers to raise more money. You've also done, you know, formalize your marketing business. I think you mentioned you had an Amazon store. So it sounds like you have a few different things going on, but kind of, you know, fast forward a bit today to tell us a little, or help us understand a little bit of where things are at today.
Yeah. And to help connect that link, remember, while my initial goal may have been just to focus on the content is one major aspect of marketing that this provided a major pillar for me. The fact is, like, the content specialty of things, the video, focusing on it wasn't going to provide at least initially a great career right away. So I had to take those marketing jobs, and then ultimately mixing it with the content. I got to do a little bit. I got to accomplish my dream of in some ways of what I did there. Now has built the skill set to come down here. So this is the natural progression. Okay, well, now I'm working in marketing. Content is not my sole focus anymore, but content is still part of it. I worked in real estate marketing for 5 years down here. I was with a company that got acquired. by a larger company, and then I worked my way, up a little bit in that company, and then eventually last year with the inflation, I decided in order to make more money, I took on some contractual gigs as an interim chief marketing officer for a couple startups, and so there was a venture capital startup. Helped them out. There was a company that was a family owned company, but it was a manufacturing plant, and they had always been selling their devices to other brands, and now we created brands around it where they own the brand and the manufacturing process. So we launched a kids electric bikes brand. We had FDA approved power wheelchairs and mobility scooters in the works, and electric farm equipment in the works. So I separated these in several different brands, and even with that, there's content. So like with the kids electric bikes, we went out and we shot over 2 days a lot of video content. There was casting involved. There was all these elements that involved in that. With that said, those interim roles are now complete, and in the recent or right now, I've been consulting. Actually, the real estate brokerage I was originally with, who got acquired, has broken back apart to go back to being to relaunch as their original company. So I'm consulting them on a retainer. I have that Amazon store that you said. That is, I'm trying to find a lot of certain brands, Polo, True Religion, Izod. There's certain brands that I'm selling a lot of apparel on, and it seems to be doing very well. And I think that for me, that is almost as much as it is a profit. It's enjoyable, because I think I learn a lot about just pricing and just a lot of e-commerce stuff, just playing around with it. And then I'm teaching some marketing MBA classes right now. So I'm teaching 2 marketing MBA classes. One for an AACSB accredited business school out of Australia, their 5th ranked business school in the country, called Deakin University. And then another one in the UK, which is called Liverpool Business School. And so I teach those on Saturday nights, and it ends up being the right times, everywhere else around the world. And I plan on getting back into, some type of full-time, long-term role again, but it's again with the entrepreneurship mindset, you always can fall back on, you always keep some of the side hustles going. And I read a book one time that said, like, the key to success is having, like, I don't know how many number, but maybe like 12 dripping faucets all at once. So if you're only it's the key diversification concepts. Like, if you're only putting all your eggs in one basket, you may have one main stream that your faucet is streaming, and that's hopefully maybe your full-time thing, or if you have a great startup business, but otherwise you've got 12 other dripping faucets, and those never let you run dry. So
no, and so now, and that was kind of, you started to hit on one of the questions I'd had, or as you're talking through that, you have what sounds to be quite a few different things going on. Sounds like, and I'm probably the same way. I have several different businesses that I'm either participate in different levels, and always love to, even do more so. But now, as you're looking at that, kind of what's the common thread, or kind of where do you see things headed, or what's the next step for you?
Yeah, the fact that I've held chief marketing officer, vice president, executive vice president, interim chief marketing officer roles. The next step is to get back into a well-established company and be there for 5 years or so, leading their marketing. Ideally, bigger, more established, larger budgets. I hope to keep growing in that capacity of continuing to put my focus on leading marketing, but just doing it at a scale that makes a greater impact. And in part, one thing that I take it into account when trying to choose who I'm working with, both on the consulting side and also on the who I'm going to work with as a full-time. I'd say, like, I want to help. So I want to help companies that are providing a value to the world, that are providing good value to the world, to continue to profit and grow, so they can keep adding additional value to the world. And with that being said, not a charity, but a for-profit business that is making money, but is also adding some type of good value. I mean, Amazon adds a value, but Netflix adds a value. But what kind of value are they bringing? If they're making people's lives easier, if they're making people's lives more happy, they're making whatever that is, as long as they're at real estate, if you're helping people move and you're helping people accomplish their goals of securing assets and building wealth, these are all things that you can feel good about at the end of the day. So
no, sounds like definitely was a great path forward. Sounds like a lot of opportunities and a lot of fun things to come. So now with that, kind of as we've caught up to the present day and even looking a bit into the future as to what may be to come, great time to transition to the two questions I always ask at the end of each episode. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
Yeah, I think the worst business decision I ever made was I guess, kind of a personal finance decision, but it taught me lessons that have translated over across all of business. And that was day trading. So it was high risk, high reward element. And I was doing very well with day trading until I wasn't. And lost a good chunk of money in like a 24, 48 hour period, all the gains that I had gained plus more. And I've heard this story from others. I had a friend a former roommate who he had a friend back in New York City that he was day trading and he earned, he was driving Ferraris and like doing very well, from the day trading. Then he lost it all. So I think like those high risk, high rewards, when you start losing, it's almost like gambling. You like try to double down, and if it doesn't go your way, you go deeper in a hole. So what I've learned from that and how this carries over, that was just a personal little finance and experiment aspect. But what I've learned from that and what makes me a better now, I consider myself a profit driving marketing executive, a marketer who focuses on ROI, is that I don't like to dig a hole. I don't, number one, I don't like the idea of thinking that you can get rich quick and easy, like some quick and easy scheme, which you've always heard this on so many things. Like there's no quick way to getting it. It's consistency and over, a period of time. But now that was like that placed that principle home for me. And so I take that not slow and steady, because I'm always achieving growth for the companies, but I take that steady approach when I work for companies, and I don't just try to go out and do something too risky. I try to make sure that there's a pretty stable and secure bet they're going to get their money back and going to earn a profit on it. Now, maybe in some ways that means we're going to grow slower than taking a risky bet where you could pay off big or you could go bankrupt. But but ideally you're gonna leave working with me in a better position than you were, and you're gonna leave more profitable and in a larger growth role. So I think that's the worst business decision I made, which has created some great business principles and financial fundamentals in the way I approach business.
Makes perfect sense, and a good mistake to learn from and a good one to go forward on. Second question that I always ask now is, if you're talking to someone that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you give them?
Yeah, I would just say stretch yourself early and often, as early and often as you can. I mean, when I graduated undergraduate a semester early, and I could have stayed for the last one, but I already was thinking that, and that time is like, okay, well, I have one more semester of time to make failures, to learn from things. I've stepped out and I left a cushy job as an EVP, at a 3,000 person company in 2022, and took on those interim CMO roles at the startups. And what I'll say about that is, I learned a lot from it, and I'm better because of it. So always just trying to stretch yourself, always just trying to keep learning, always learning. I'm always listening to audio. Podcasts like this. This is, listening to Devin's show here. Listen into LinkedIn Learning has a lot of great videos that you can learn from too, just to stay atop of trends and everything. So always be learning, always be reading, always be trying to put yourself in uncomfortable situations, because then you're going to learn a lot from it. It compounds. That's why I'm saying early and often. It compounds just like money compounds. That experience and overcoming obstacles. So.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great takeaway and makes perfect sense. So, well, awesome. Well, with that, now as we wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah, well, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you want to look me up, it's Brandon. It's spelled with an E, so Branden, and then Cobb, Cobb. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can email me at Branden, Branden at marketingexec.us.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, can make a connection, if nothing else, a new best friend. So with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you, the listeners are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. Just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, and leave us a review, because we want to make sure that we can help as many startups and small business out there as possible. That helps us to do so. And on that note, if you ever need help with your startup, your small business with patents, trademarks, or anything else, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. We're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Brandon, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Awesome. Thank you, Devin. And thanks to the audience as well.
Hey, my pleasure. Have a good one.